And welcome back to an episode of the Clear Jets podcast. We're Ben Blessington and Michael Nania. Michael, this is our last podcast before free agency kicks off. We're recording this Saturday night. We got a ton of great mailbag questions. Excited to hop into this. But first, how are you feeling just under 48 hours away from free agency kicking off?
I'm doing really good. And, even though we're still 2 days away from the official start of free agency, it kind of feels like that all the action has started already. I mean, so many targets that we talked about for the Jets are already off the board. Amari Cooper, obviously, being the most notable one with a trade to the Browns today. Chris Godwin, Calvin Ridley, Devontae Adams, Dalton Schultz, David Njoku. So many guys are off the board already. So it really feels like that the drama has already started, and that once free agency opens, there's going to be a lot of Jets fans are going to be eager for things to happen with how many names we've already missed out on. So it's going to be a stressful but also exciting time, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, every year free agency starts the exact same way. It hits noon on the deadline. I put out that Joker gift from The Dark Knight where he goes, "Here we go," whatever. Right when it kicks off every year. It's a tradition. And then about 30 minutes after that, people start, wanting to fire the GM. It's 12:30 is when the Douglas firing calls happen. No matter how the day or the rest of the week will turn up, I guarantee you there will be a boatload of angry Jets fans Monday, and hell, maybe even in Monday night or Tuesday morning. Because like you said, a lot of the action's already happened. I think also a lot of the excitement of the offseason actually gets done this year, at least, has been done with the trades. I mean, already with Russell Wilson, and then they just sent Amari Cooper to the Browns. The news with Rodgers going back to Green Bay, like a lot of the big pieces have already moved. Obviously there's still Deshaun Watson out there now that his situation is cleared up a little bit. So he's a big player, but outside of that, I don't really feel like not optimistic. I don't feel as excited for free agency maybe as I normally do, because I don't think this is the year where the Jets are going to go out and sign a big name free agent. I still think they're going to be active. Don't get me wrong. The Jets are going to be active. They're going to sign a lot of players next week. It's going to be a good time, but I don't think they're going to sign that one, big name where you get like Le'Veon Bell, a great example. When Le'Veon Bell signed, Mike, I don't remember your exact reaction to it, but Jets Twitter was on fire for like an hour, and it felt like we won a playoff game, and then he ended up sucking. So a lot of times those big free agents aren't necessarily even what they're billed to be. We'll address this in the mailbag, but I think my prediction for this week is that Jets fans might be a little unhappy at first, but I think by the end of it, they're going to recognize that Douglas made a lot of really good moves and made this football team a lot better. We had our podcast earlier in the week where we went through some targets. A lot of the same guys are going to come up. And any last thoughts? But I guess we'll just hop right into it. From @Devin Jad, he says, "Does anyone believe Douglas is going to spend money, or is it business as usual?" I think this is a fitting opening question, Michael. There was a lot of talk on the Twitter timeline Saturday about the Jets cap situation. I know you were kind of talking about it a little bit, as how it's a little bit less than some are perceiving. The beat writers talking about that. Then you have a whole segment of the fan base. It's like, half the league is playing like cap space isn't real. Why are the Jets, who are, I think they have like the fourth most cap space before cuts, why is it so strict for them? And how aggressive do you think Douglas will be with this money, and maybe lay out the amount of money that they actually have to spend and how they have to divvy that up with all the holes that they have?
Yeah, what's really interesting this year, and we were talking about this before we started, but it feels like the entire league is in a worse cap situation than in previous years. Like the Jets, for example, have about $48 million in cap space, not including what they have to give to the rookie class, but that's top 5 in the league right now. Whereas last year they were way ahead of that at about $70 million at this point. And they're in about the same place. And then there are so many teams in the league that are way over the cap right now. There are teams that only have a small bit of positive cap space. So I'm interested to see if, how the deals on the open market are going to sort of go along with the cap situations that these teams are in, because there aren't a lot of teams in awesome positions cap wise compared to last year and previous years. And then the Jets, like I was thinking about this earlier, but I think I've definitely done it a little bit. I think some Jets fans are, not everyone, but kind of have too high expectations in terms of how, like you said, the big signings, in terms of how many of those they'll be able to make, because, million raw cap space, but they have to keep at least 13 million open to sign their rookie class. They have 2 top 10 picks, 2 high second round picks. And then beyond that, they're going to re-sign quite a few guys too. Already got Joyner, McDermott, Parks, Flacco probably coming, potentially LDT, Elijah Riley on the exclusive rights deal, Mike White. So that 48 million is a misleading number, and they're maybe going to be operating in that 25 million range before any cuts. So I agree with your approach. I think they are going to be aggressive, but just not in a splashy way. I think it's going to be aggressive in the sense that they're going to fill a lot of holes, give themselves the flexibility to operate freely in the draft where they don't have to use the draft to fill holes. And I think that's going to be the main approach. I think we'll see one big free agent, like an 8-figure sort of guy, whether that's at guard or safety, I think is where that's going to be. But outside of that, I think it's going to be a lot of hole plugging, and that can be good. I was looking at last year's teams, cap space at this point, and the closest team in cap space to the Jets right now last year was the Bengals with 43 million. They made their one splash signing with Trey Hendrickson. That worked great. In addition, other than that, though, there weren't a ton of splashes. They got 4 mid-tier guys, a couple corners, defensive tackle, Ogunjobi, and an offensive lineman, Riley Reef. And outside of those 4 plus Hendrickson, no one signed for more than $2 million per year. It was just, filling out the roster, depth, backups, those types of players, and it worked out pretty good for them. So I think that's the type of free agency we're going to see. One splash, and we are going to see aggression, but it's just going to be filling out the roster, not necessarily going big fish hunting.
Exactly. I think if Joe Douglas does absolutely nothing and the first 24 or 48 hours of free agency, I would understand why Jets fans are going to get angry, but I don't think that's going to be the case. I think, is he going to go sign a JC Jackson and fork over $20 million? Probably not. A guy like Marcus Williams, who the Jets have been linked to, do I see him shelling out $15 million or more for a safety? No. So a lot of the big, and then it's like, you look at the receiver market at this point, Allen Robinson's the top guy available. And I think they'll sniff around Robinson, but if you're Allen Robinson, you went from Blake Bortles to Mitch Trubisky to a rookie quarterback last year. Are you going to go hitch your wagon to Zach Wilson? Like, no, Allen Robinson's not going to sign with the Jets unless they overpay him. And I don't see the Jets doing that. If we've learned one thing from Douglas's 2 free agencies is that he draws his line in the sand. That doesn't mean he won't sign good players or give them good money like you saw with Carl Lawson or Corey Davis last year, but he's not going to overpay for guys. So I guess the point of this is just to be stay off Twitter maybe a little bit. I think you're going to see a lot of negativity about the Jets this next week on Monday, and I just don't think it's warranted because Douglas isn't going to go out there and take a big swing on a guy like J.C. Jackson. Or I guess Amari Cooper was today, the example that got a lot of Jets fans riled up. Doesn't mean that they're not going to be active. I mean, the core of this offseason is going to be the draft picks. I mean, Michael and I were looking at the AV for, I don't know if this is the first question, we're going to spend 10 minutes on it, but we were looking at the AV for the, what is that? What is AV short for again? It's like
approximate value.
Approximate value. I was trying to say estimated, and I was like, that doesn't make sense. But for the 2019 draft classes, like just ranking them, and of course the Jets 2019 class, McCagnon's last class was like tied for 29th or whatever. But you look at the best draft classes, and it's like 2-3 hits out of all the picks. And so when you look at the Jets draft class last year, you put into perspective how big of a deal that draft class was for the Jets. And they have even more capital this year. So the crux of this offseason and whether or not the Jets improve a lot next year is going to come down to the draft. Free agency, I hope they sign 4 or 5 starters. They bring good players, add some veterans, make the team better. But then I don't see them making a big splash. And honestly, I don't really see that player in the market outside of J.C. Jackson. Let's keep moving. I'm sure some of the other stuff we want to talk about will come up here. From @SportsFiend, the GOAT, everybody knows. How important do you think it is for notable players in the squad to help recruit free agents to come to the Jets? What do you think should lead that? Who do you think should lead that charge this offseason and why? I mean, we said Jamal Adams recruiting players for years, and honestly, I mean, I guess 2019 they got Bell and Mosley, but yes, it matters. I think spreading the word that the Jets are different and that Robert Saleh is who, I'm not in the locker room, so I don't want to say who I think Robert Saleh is, but it sounds like he's received some glowing reviews. I think that is important because the perception of the Jets, the league wide, is that they've been a dumpster fire for a decade, and that they're a losing franchise, and that they're picking fourth in the draft this year. So yeah, that is going to be big, but is it going to make the biggest difference? No. I mean, players are going to sign where the money is. And so if the Jets want a guy, they're going to have to pay for him. But Michael, I mean, first, your thoughts on that. And then second, who do you think is the best recruiter on this team, or who's the person that should lead that recruiting charge?
I agree with you. I think it's important to an extent. I think there's a lot of recruiting that goes on behind the scenes that we don't hear about, because obviously all we react to is the tweets and the liking posts and everything, the stuff that's public. But I'm sure there's a lot of behind the scenes action that contributes to some of the movement that goes on. So I think it's important to an extent, but like you said, it's about the money at the end of the day. So that's what's most important. But I think another important thing to Jets right now is it definitely does matter to have a good perception. Aside from recruiting, just being a good, stable organization. And I think that's something that the Jets do have better than previous years. Even though they are a 4-win team, I think they have a better reputation and a better culture than they have in past seasons. And that's something that, with Tyrann Mathieu, he's a great culture changing guy, great leader and everything. And I've seen people say like the Jets need that type of guy. I don't think they really do need that type of guy right now. I think if this were 2019 last year, then you definitely could say, yeah, they need that type of guy. But I don't think the Jets really need that anymore. I feel like it's just about talent right now. I feel like they've kind of solved that aspect of things. And winning does come with that.
No, yeah. I think
yeah, go ahead.
I think they're always, Saleh and Douglas have made it clear that they're always going to prioritize character, and that's where they're going to get their locker room culture. So it's like one guy that I get exactly what you're saying. It's like they don't need a culture changer. They're changing the culture with the entire locker room. And we agree on Mathieu completely. He's a good player, but he is past his prime. He's a mildly overrated. It's a non-premium position. He's going to get paid a ton. It's like that is not a signing that. I mean, look, if he gets signed, he would get the fan base kind of energized. He's a big name, but like you said, it's very McCagnon-esque.
Yeah, so I think they're in a good spot reputation-wise. How much does that help? Is that more talk than actual impact? Probably to an extent, but I think they're in a good spot there. And you couple that with their cap space, and they should be able to make make the moves they want to make, and players won't actively avoid them. In terms of who would lead the recruiting charge, I feel like you want your quarterback to be at the front of that, at least with offensive players.
Well, yeah, but Zach Wilson isn't. I mean,
not that I actively want him to do that.
Well, no, but Zach Wilson is a. I mean, he's gonna
maybe Michael Carter. Yeah, Michael Carter.
You're missing the boat here. You're missing those guys have a rookie. I mean, they're going to their second year. Like Zach Wilson, Michael Carter, like they have some connections. No. The guy who could. First of all, guys who are in the open market, veterans, the guys who are 26, 27, older, the guys who have been in the league for 4, 5, 6 years. So they're not going to listen to a one or two, rookie player or a second-year player, their opinion about the team. Yes,
guy who you're hitching your wagon to, though.
Yeah,
you do want to be, convinced by him.
Yeah, but we're talking recruiter. Like, I think CJ Mosley, like that's the type of guy that if CJ Mosley talks to you about how this culture's changed or whatever, like I think he alluded to that earlier in the offseason, how he was going to do his job to recruit some guys. Like that is the type of guy who could maybe change the mind of a few free agents. Yes, is it important for a free agent wide receiver to have some good chemistry with their quarterback? But let's be honest, these guys are making their decisions on money and where can they win and put them in the best position. And then like references is down the list. But no, CJ Mosley's like there's probably a few other veterans I'm not thinking, but
I agree with you. I was just trying to go a different direction.
Zach Wilson, if he has once he has a good year and he's an established quarterback, then you're absolutely right. But until that, it doesn't matter. I mean, it could be Mike White, clamoring for these guys. In free agents' minds, it's like Zach Wilson hasn't done anything to deserve that reference. We do have another one from @sports_fiend. He says, what would you trade for DK Metcalf to be our number one wide receiver in our offense? Also, since he has 1 year left on his rookie deal, what long-term contract would you like to structure to secure him for the future? All right, we're getting ahead of our skis here a little bit. Then the next question is also about DK. We'll answer that one mildly separate. We'll answer that one separately, but I tweeted this earlier. I think, Michael, you addressed it also on Twitter. The Seahawks are not trading DK Metcalf. I think, and put it this way, there's maybe I'll say a less than 5% chance that they trade him. There's a less than 0% chance that John Schneider's ringing up Joe Douglas and trading him to New York. John Schneider still has nightmares about Joe Douglas over that Jamal Adams trade. DK Metcalf is not going to be a Jet. If he is, I will love to eat, humble pie on this one. Absolutely. But it's not going to happen. Every year Jets fans do this. They get themselves hyped up for some pipe dream, and it's just not going to happen. The Jets, if they were going to make a big splash before the draft in free agency or the trade market, Amari Cooper was maybe more realistic than DK Metcalf because the Cowboys were shopping him, and then obviously he got traded. But DK, first of all, the Seahawks have contract control over him for this year. They have a couple of franchise tags. They're obviously going to try to work out a long-term deal. If DK causes a big stink and tries to hold out and request a trade, then maybe they deal him. But unless the Jets drastically overpay, I just don't see it. But what would I give up? I'd give up 10 for DK. What about you?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I've kind of pushed it a little bit just because it's fun to talk about, but
you did it for the likes. Come on, let's be honest now.
Yeah, just like everyone who posts an anti-Jamal Adams tweets, like, I just want to get some likes right now.
Yeah, I want to feel good about myself.
Jamal Adams sucks. Here's 1,000 likes.
Yeah.
Low-hanging fruit Seahawks Jamal Adams joke. Here's 10,000 front page of Reddit, but I digress. Anyway, with DK Metcalf, I don't think it's going to happen. If you're a rebuilding team, you have a 24-year-old receiver who you can sign to a multi-year deal, and he'll still be in his prime by the time ready to compete. He can help the quarterback they're going to try to develop. I highly doubt he gets traded, but if the Jets were to trade for him, I'd probably do a 10. The 10th overall pick.
Have you seen any rumblings of him being on the trade market outside of Jets fans?
Nothing legitimate.
Yeah, no. He's not getting traded unless he causes a big stink, and then even then, I don't see the Jets doing it. Or I don't see the Seahawks trading it with the Jets. I'm sure the Jets would love DK Metcalf and absolutely be interested in him. But you guys have to remember, he's 24 years old, and he's legitimately one of the best receivers in the NFL. I love DK Metcalf. It's not going to happen, though. And then our guy at Doggy Boy 4, like I said that, Michael. I rephrase because he had submitted one about Amari Cooper for this exact same question, and then Cooper got traded like 90 seconds later. He said, I rephrase, trade for DK or draft Garrett Wilson with 10th overall. And then I put out the anti-DK tweet, and I think our guy Doggy Boy thought I was adding him, but I wasn't. We've been talking, Michael and I have been talking about how DK is not going to be a Jet for a while. But would I rather trade for DK or draft Garrett Wilson? I would rather trade for DK. What's more likely? Drafting Garrett Wilson at 10. But there's a part of me, Michael, and this kind of opens up. This is a free agency podcast, so I don't want to get too into the draft. But if they don't address receiver in free agency, at least substantially, I mean, they could go after, a mid-tier guy like a Russell Gage or somebody like that. I guess they could go after Christian Kirk and try to pencil him in as a starter, but likely they're going to go after a mid guy in free agency. Do you think the Jets are forced into using a pick on receiver in the first 2 days? I mean, they have to take one on in round 2 if they don't sign one in free agency. So, and some people will be mad if they don't take one in round 1, especially since the modus operandi this offseason has been help your rookie quarterback, surround him with talent. So if they do what we expect them to do this week and don't go and sign a big price free agent receiver, which I don't really think there is a can't miss guy anyways, or trade for a guy that we're not talking about. Do you think it's a receiver at 10? Or do you think that receiver in the second round? Or like what is the plan at receiver if you're going to try to surround Zach with as much talent as possible?
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting because I feel like our plan all along was, make that all-in move, get a wide receiver one, a Cooper, Godwin, Ridley, Metcalf, whatever. But obviously now that's seeming very unrealistic. And they're just going to have to pick from a wide receiver pool free agency that is, it's a good class of free agent wide receivers. There are no surefire stars left, but there are a lot of good, solid players. But from a Jets perspective, do you want to invest in one of those mid-tier guys and use a big chunk of cap space on that, and then maybe take yourself out of play for taking a wide receiver high in the draft? It's interesting to think about how they might approach it now. But I think for me, the conclusion that I've sort of come to is that it's about certainty right now with Zach Wilson. You have to help this guy. You have to help him as much as you can. And you can't afford to bank on the draft to do that. Obviously, the ceiling is higher and the cap situation is higher or is better if you rely on the draft to fill that hole at receiver. But the floor is also much, much lower. There's a very good chance that even at 10, no matter who the prospect is that you like, whether it's London, Wilson, Burks, whoever, just based on history, the odds that that guy's going to come in and be a good player for you in year one are very low. And those are just the facts.
I don't know about very low. I know what you're saying.
It's about certainty. And
sorry.
They definitely are. They definitely are. Just go ahead.
Go ahead, but I'm wrong. But no, I know what you're saying. Statistically speaking, well, first of all, if you look at the last few draft classes, obviously they've been amazing. This draft class at receiver is very good, but I'm willing to bet that there will be multiple year one contributors in this class. So obviously, the guy you draft, the chances that he is an instant success is low. It's not like it's improbable. Like how many rookie receivers do you think will have a substantial impact year one out of this class? I'm saying at least three.
What entails
starter level. I mean, I'm trying to think of a statistic. A lot of it comes down to the quarterback. I mean, I don't know. What do you think? Over
800?
Yeah, over 700 yards. I don't know, 750 yards, something like that.
3 or 4.
Yeah. So it's not impossible, and I don't know. Is there a guy in free agency?
It's definitely not impossible. But I mean, that's just the point. It's like, do you want to
and you look at the success?
Sorry,
we're having some connection stuff, but and you look at the success of the young rookie receivers the last few years. It's like it does show you that it can be done. I know what you're saying. I think everybody would have liked to have walked away with this offseason with their own Stephon Diggs, who, by the way, Josh Allen didn't get until year 3. But I do understand that there's a sense of urgency to surround your young quarterback with talent so he can develop and also so we can evaluate him, because that was a big problem with Darnold, is that half the time it felt like we couldn't evaluate him because he had nothing around him. I get what you're saying, but I'm more bullish on even if they don't draft a receiver at 4 or at 10 and they get one at 35, if they draft Christian Watson or Pickens or somebody who falls or whatever it is. Traylon Burks had a bad 40. It's possible he could fall to 35. You never know on draft day. And you land one of those guys and you're walking out of there with Corey Davis. Who do you want to use? We'll use Christian Watson. He's probably the most realistic guy at 35. You're walking out of there, Corey Davis, Christian Watson, Elijah Moore as your 3 receivers. It's like, and you address tight end. Is it amazing? No, but it's still good, and it has a high ceiling, like you said. And this is an offense that wants to be more 12 personnel. Like, I don't know. I'm not as
well. What I was getting into is that I think that you can, sign mid-tier guy, Russell Gage or Cedric Wilson, DJ Chark, someone like that. I think you can do that and get some of that certainty and instant impact. And I think that doesn't take you out of play for drafting a receiver in the first round if you want to. They can escape Corey Davis next year. Injuries happen. Lack of development happens. Hopefully Elijah Moore is great, but you don't know. So I think you could still, sign a receiver and draft one in the top 10. That's going all in for your quarterback. So I think that's really the point I was getting to.
So do you think
you still should dip into this market?
So do you think that they have? Well, I agree with you fully. I guess I was angling more towards the draft. Do you think that they have to draft a receiver at 10?
I don't think you could ever draft with that mentality.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah,
it's just that's where it comes to for me. I mean, I think I agree with you that with 4 picks in the top 40, they definitely should get one, at least one. Well, not at least one, but just get one with one of those 4 picks. But I don't think it has to be forced at 10. I think that's why it's important to sign one in free agency so you don't feel as forced to do that.
Yeah, I think what you're saying, especially with the freedom about Corey Davis's contract, where they can't get out of it next year. I mean, you could give a sizable contract to, if you want to go after a guy like Christian Kirk or somebody like that, and then just cut whoever you don't like. But I think you're right. I think they go after a guy like a Russell Gage, and then I think they probably go receiver day 2, 35 or 38. I'm not saying they won't do it at 10, but I'm just saying I don't think it's for sure locked that they'll take a receiver at 10, which might be the wrong path, but it's just my feeling about things. I don't think receiver is as big of a need as people think it is. I will say, though, the depth is horrendous. It's like you go Corey Davis, Elijah Moore, and then it's like DJ Montgomery and Denzel Mims and Tariq Black. And it's like they need to beef up this position. It's certainly a need. But it's certainly improved over the last few years to the point where it's like, all right, you bring in one high valued rookie and you add him to this group and you build up the depth. And I'm feeling good about the receiver spot. I'm not as down on it maybe as other people are, but yes, I would have loved to have our own Stephon Diggs this offseason. I think this is a great segue into the next question from Force and Right. He says 3 moves, in parentheses, draft, free agency, or trade, that help Zach / the offense the most. What are the most crucial moves to set him up for success? Michael, I've talked a lot. What are the 3 moves in your mind that would help Zach and the offense the most that the Jets could do over the next few months?
All right, so I guess now we're in a better position to answer this now that things have played out a little bit, the dust has settled, and we kind of know what we're dealing with going into next week, who's available, who's not.
Right.
So I think for me, I'm going to go back to what I was just talking about. I think you should dip into this mid-tier receiver market, get a good solid guy to round out this trio.
Who is that guy?
And I'll get to it, and then sign that guy, and you still have the flexibility to draft someone wherever you feel like you have the value. So I think that I like Russell Gage. I think he makes sense to round this out. And I know nobody wants to hear that because you had dreams of Godwin, Adams, whoever it may be. You don't want to hear about Russell Gage, but he brings a lot to the table that I think helps him out. He's a consistent guy. You were telling me that he was reliable for your fantasy team, so that's good enough for me.
He was a beast in fantasy. He was consistently giving me some tempo.
But yeah, no, he's improved every single year of his career. Just had a career high in receiving yards per game at about 55, which is what you want, your third receiver. He's really good at beating man coverage, had some of the best man numbers in the league last year. I mean, he was up in terms of his yards per route run, creating targets against man. He was up there with Cooper Kupp, AJ Brown, DK Metcalf. And beating man coverage is important because it's not something that Corey Davis is great at. And it's other than Elijah Moore, they don't really have anyone who could do it. So that's something that Gage does well. He had an underrated season for that Falcons last year. So I think he's a good guy to round that out, give you some security and improvement going to the draft. Then I think you look to the tight end position. Actually, no, forget tight end for now. Right guard. I think you have to make a free agent move. And just like receiver, plug that hole, give yourself security going to the draft. And I think there are a lot of free agent guards that would be an upgrade over what they had last year and are just flat out really good players and can complete a good offensive line. So I think you start with Laken Tomlinson and James Daniels. If you can get one of those 2 guys, that'd be outstanding, I think, to complete this offensive line. So Russell Gage, one of those 2 guards, Tomlinson and Daniels. And then you go to the draft, and I think that ideally you draft a tight end with one of those 2 second-round picks, hopefully Trey McBride. I think that's a really good dream trio at this point to round it out. So if I had to pick specific guys, let's say Russell Gage, I'm going to lean towards Laken Tomlinson at guard and Trey McBride. I think that'd be a good trio.
And then just because I know everybody's getting down on what the Jets are doing to surround Zach Wilson, because I think you laid out a great plan. You go Russell Gage, you get a guard in free agency, you draft Trey McBride, and then let's say you take George Pickens, Christian Watson, a receiver who falls, whatever.
Right.
I feel like that's and you probably sign a tight end too, let's say Hayden Hurst. It's like it's kind of how I see the offense looking, and we'll see how it turns out. I'm happy with that. I'm happy. I still feel like that's enough to evaluate Zach Wilson, especially on the offensive line. I think there's a question about the guards later, so I'll hold off on that. I pretty much agree with everything you said there. I like McBride a lot. If he's gone, I still think there's a lot of good tight ends in the draft, so it's not a must. I do think that they have to address that position in both free agency and the draft. That is why it's like they have to get a Hayden Hurst or an Uzama or a Max Williams. They have to do something in free agency, and then you turn to the draft and it's like McBride or Ruckert or Likely or whoever, Weidemeyer, whoever it is. I think that is huge. Upgrading that tight end spot is going to be huge for Zach. And I agree. I think they're going to sign a guard. I think they're going to sign a guard Monday or Tuesday. There's a lot of good ones. We'll get to the guard position in a few more questions because I think that's a good position to talk about because I'm pretty confident they're going to make a move there. All right, let's move on. I think you did a good job of answering that one. For Matt New Year, actually, let me take a step back here. This is not listed, and I was just thinking of it when you were answering the question, and I want to ask it before I forget. So let's just say this one's from @Ben Blessington. For you, Michael, what's the worst, or what are some of the worst moves that Douglas could make in your mind? Not just about Zach, but just in general in free agency next week. I mean, because we know like what we want pipe dreams of Douglas to do, but is there an Adam Schefter notification you could get on your phone that would make your heart sink and negatively? Are there any signings that you would be really upset about or overpays or I know you're not a big Braxton Barrios fan, but
right.
So what are some of the bad moves that Douglas can make? And so if any of these happen, we'll know that Michael isn't happy.
Okay, so I'll definitely pick a few, and I'll be honest, and I'll try to stick to it if it does happen. I'll find the optimism like I always do, but here are my unbiased concerns at this moment. These things haven't happened yet. So let's go. Here are a few. Number one comes to mind, Tyrann Mathieu. I wouldn't be a huge fan of that, to say the least. I think, 30 plus safety. I think you look at his advanced numbers, they're really not nearly as impressive as you would think with his Pro Bowls and everything. All he's really good at is interceptions. And even those you look at, I saw somewhere, a guy drops a ball off his chest, bounces into his hands. He's just standing there. Lamar Jackson throws to him, stuff like that. I'm not impressed enough to sign a 30 plus safety for 14, 15 million a year.
Agreed.
So I'd not be a huge fan of that one. You brought up Braxton Barrios. I think I would like to see him back, but there are numbers to where he comes back that would kind of make me cringe a little bit. If it were any 7 plus per year, I think I wouldn't love that. But that depends on what else they do at wide receiver. If they, sign Russell Gage, whoever before that, and then Barrios is your fourth guy, that I wouldn't love it too much. But if they do sign him to be, that's your move, I guess you want him to be your slot receiver. I can understand it, but ultimately, I'm not too high in Barrios. I wouldn't like a huge number for him.
I know you have another one. I just wanted to chime in here real quick. Yeah, how would you feel about? Why you kind of answered the question, but it is possible that maybe they don't sign a guy like Russell Gage. Maybe they just, bring back like Keelan Cole or somebody like that. They sign Barrios and then they draft somebody, and then Barrios is your fourth receiver. Would you hate that world, or if the Jets are that optimistic about Barrios and they're going to pay him $6 or $7 million a year, he has to be your third or fourth receiver, you'd think. So, yeah, I mean, how do you feel about Barrios being the sole free agent acquisition at receiver if the money is right? Because I know that's the big sticking point for you.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, again, like I like him, but I feel like we're trying to find guys who really change the game. I feel like Barrios is a good capitalizing player, if you know what I mean. Like he has good speed, good vision, good in the return game, durable, doesn't miss games.
Yeah, sounds like changing the game to me, but okay.
But he doesn't really bring. He doesn't have a huge deep game. He's not great against man coverage. Doesn't really win his routes too often. He's a nice player to have, but I feel like that you have to be doing. If that's your only move, you have to be doing a little bit more.
Are you ready? Are you ready for him to go to Miami or New England and just shit all over the Jets? Because I'm ready. I've seen this movie too many times. At the very least, if he leaves, even if he flames out and isn't a good free agent, I guarantee you has a good game against the Jets. I feel it. I don't know why. I just feel it. He's going to have one game against the Jets where he'll make one touchdown, one kickoff return, and Jets Twitter will be on fire. But I think you, if I'm being honest, I think you underrate Barrios a little bit, but you're not wrong. A lot of the fan base is overrating him. And the truth lies somewhere in the middle of I think your evaluation is probably closer, but I think the language you're using to describe him is a little,
I think it's pretty fair. I think I'm being fair.
Well, you're saying, well, he's a player who's good at capitalizing. It's like, well, he is extremely high football IQ, and I'm not just saying that. It's Saleh was talking about his impact on Wilson towards the end of the season in one of his press conferences, and when I was listening to him talk about, Barrios knows not just where he's supposed to line up and all the options on his route, he knows where everybody else is supposed to line up and their responsibilities, and he was able to help Wilson, and those are the smart, hardworking players that the Jets want to keep. And I think he is faster than you're giving him credit for. I think his route running has gotten better.
He's definitely
his hands.
Fast. I never said he wasn't fast. He definitely has the long speed.
Who do you think's faster between him and Moore?
That's actually tough. Um,
I think
they're really close. It's
I think
hard to pick one.
oh,
He does have the long speed. It's just he doesn't really
already.
win deep that much, and he doesn't make a lot of people miss either the return game or an offense. Like if it's there for you, he will get as much as he possibly can because he has the speed and he has the vision. He'll pick the right hole. We've seen that. It's just like when I need someone to create something, win on a route, win on a slant, win on a corner or something, or, on a screen game, if the blocking isn't there, can you make something happen? That's where I don't really think he adds a lot of value, and I think that hurts him. But he does bring a lot to the table.
I will say his hands did get much better this year.
Yeah, definitely.
And that, like, if you're going to be a slot receiver, you have to have reliable hands, and I think he did that. I think he is a legitimate slot receiver, and he's a guy that I wouldn't be upset about paying $6 million if it's like, okay, he can be a slot receiver for you, can do all the gadget stuff, he's an elite returner, but people are forgetting that LaFleur wants to be, maybe not entirely, but he wants to be a 12 personnel offense. I mean, look at San Francisco. They don't have a super deep receiver room. They obviously have Debo and they have Ayuk and they have good receivers. Don't get me wrong, but a slot receiver in this offense isn't the biggest deal. And it's like, if you're going to pay a guy who's a slot receiver / receiver / special teamer, and you're going to pay him $7 or $8 million, I just don't see Joe Douglas doing that. So I think he probably ultimately leaves. And then right. Miami, there's the connection with, the university, and Mike McDaniel will use him like LaFleur did. And I don't know. Makes sense. Oh, by the way, though, Elijah Moore did run the faster 40. Barrios actually was a lot slower than I thought. It said 4.44 at the 2018 combine. And Moore was 4.35, I think. So.
And I was going to say, I think you said it with, they have Debo Samuel, they have Ayuk, 2 receivers. That's what I think the goal is. And they can, adjust. LaFleur showed that at the end of last season, he was willing to make it an 11 personnel team because that's what worked. But I don't think that's the long-term vision.
Right.
So we'll see how they handle it. Wide receiver is easily the most interesting position to watch out of any of them this offseason.
It kind of always feels like it is. I mean, quarterback is probably number one, but receiver is just such an exciting position. But like you said, I think look at San Francisco with those 2 receivers. Give me Gage, give me a rookie in round 2. I'm feeling good about this receiver room. I don't know. I'm not as down on it as maybe other people are. Tweet me. Tell me I'm an idiot. It's okay. From @New York _Nick, besides Hutchinson, who's your next 2 favorite edge rushers, and why does the one ranked higher than the other? Okay, Nick, this is a free agency podcast. Get out of here with this shit. Then he said, I want to have a wall for Zach and Carter, but wouldn't drafting an O-line in the first 3 years in a row be kind of ridiculous? Again, free agency podcast. But we'll answer this. Besides Hutchinson, who next 2 favorite edge rushers? I do think they take an edge at 4. I know Trayvon Walker has flown up a lot of draft boards after his combine. He interviewed well. He seems like that is a Jets type of player. Super high ceiling, position of need, high character, high football IQ. So he's flown up the rankings. Obviously, they like Jermaine Johnson from the Senior Bowl. He didn't even play, but the practices alone put him in consideration for 4. And then obviously there's Kayvon. So one of those 3 guys, and you never know about Hutchinson. He could fall too. One of those guys will be a Jet in my eyes. And I think it'll be at 4. So my next 2 favorite behind Hutchinson, I'll probably go. I'm not going to pretend to have, at this point, to have watched enough of Trayvon versus Jermaine to make a call. I'll say, I don't know. I've made that mistake before too many times where it's like I've watched a little bit and I'll make a statement and then I'll watch more and be like, okay, wait, I was wrong. So I'll refrain from that. This is a free agency podcast. Ask that question in like 2 more weeks when we have enough time. Michael and I did watch a few. We watched a game of Trayvon and a game of Jermaine. Jermaine Johnson had a few more plays, but that's here nor there. I will say the thing about Trayvon, though, to remember, he is on a defense in Georgia with a bunch of other NFL players. He's playing on the defensive line with a bunch of other NFL players. He's got Nakobe Dean, the best linebacker in college football, behind him. Some of those stats, not necessarily that he was a stat pad or anything, but you do have to take that into consideration when evaluating is who is he playing alongside. So that's the one thing I guess you could say especially for an edge rusher. Because that type of help really does help. And then he said he wants to have a wall in front of Zach. Oh, sorry, Michael, I didn't give you a chance to answer that. Who are your 2 favorite edge rushers behind Hutchinson? Do you have an answer, or are you going to pass like me?
I'll give a shot at answering this. Again, let's put out the disclaimer. The majority of my film watching has yet to come, but I feel like I've done enough.
It always comes like the week of the draft, I feel like.
That's true, but I mean, we're going to work harder this year. But I feel like I've looked at enough numbers and at least a minimum amount of film to have somewhat of a take. But again, take it with a grain of salt. But for me, I think I still like Carl Aftis. People kind of stopped talking about him after I think Johnson usurped him with the Senior Bowl. But I don't see why Carl Aftis still shouldn't be on the board. He had a nice combine with his athleticism numbers, which was supposed to be the question mark for him. But I think he checks the box of what you want opposite Lawson, because Lawson is your speed rusher, not an amazing run defender, but all out pass rusher, good athlete, smaller at the end. Carl Aftis can bring a little bit more size on the other side, but set the edge a little bit better, but still has the athleticism and ability to win as a pass rusher. And his numbers as a pass rusher, wins, pressures, all that stuff is right on par with Hutchinson and Thibodeau, whereas some of these other guys are not quite in that level. So I still like Carl Aftis, and Johnson actually is one guy who his numbers are not, they're still very good, but they're not quite as elite as Carl Aftis, Hutchinson, Thibodeau. But what he's shown these past few months in the Senior Bowl, his film, and just everything that he's been able to do to improve his stock since the season has ended has been impressive. And he's a guy who kind of flew under the radar, and what I've seen from him is pretty impressive. I think he has good two-way ability. The upside is there, the athleticism. So I like him. I think he's definitely in play with either one of those top 10 picks, either 4 or 10. So I like Karlaftis and Hutchins and Johnson as my next two right now.
It's such
in that order: Karlaftis, then Johnson.
Okay, it's such a good defensive line class. The Jets are at least going to take two. I mean, an edge and interior in my eyes, and arguably even more. I think there's a chance all these guys are going to be good. It's really just what type of scheme are you running, and then who do you? I've seen kind of both attitudes by Douglas at times. I think 2020 there was a few examples where maybe he took the guy with the higher floor than the higher ceiling. Not all the time. Obviously, he took Becton and he took Mims, but when we got to day 3, it felt like, when they took P. Ryan and they took James Morgan and just some of those picks in the middle, I didn't necessarily love. But last year, you look at the strategy of, especially when you look at some of the defensive picks, they took guys with high ceilings and super low floors and trust their coaches to develop them. And when you have faith in your coaching staff that they can develop players, that's huge. So that's why it's like a guy like Trayvon Walker, if you could build a defensive end in a lab, he'd look like him. If he's interviewing well, if his football IQ is there, obviously the film is there. I have a weird feeling that Trayvon Walker's a Jet, but again, it's too early to really know. All right, back-to-back questions that are a little repetitive, so we'll fly through these. For Matt, not their fault, just the way the questions are got ordered. For Matt, Tom Hind, is the Jermaine Johnson hype real, and can he be in play at 4? I definitely think he's in play at 4. I think the hype is real, but we'll see if the hype is real enough for him to go ahead of Kayvon. I mean, that's the question. I think there's a real chance that Kayvon is there at 4, and it's like, would the character concerns be so much that the Jets would take a guy like Trayvon or Jermaine Johnson over him? That I don't know yet. And Michael, if there's anything you want to add there, just stop me, because
I agree with you. I don't think he's going to pass either of the top 2 guys yet, but if those 2 guys go in the top 4 like we expect them to, although Thibodeau we're starting to see some potential, but yeah, I think those 2 guys are not going to get surpassed. But if those 2 guys are off the board, could Johnson be in play at 4? I definitely think so.
From @Verge001, what are the chances Joe Douglas does not chase a receiver or a number 1 receiver in free agency, deciding to bet on Moore breaking out and CD returning to his norms? Would that be a huge mistake? Well, Michael, is there a number 1 receiver in free agency? I mean, Allen Robinson, who had a down year last year, and look, he was, dominant his entire career before that. So, maybe it's an outlier. Maybe he's, getting past his prime. I mean, that is around the age where Des Bryant started to fall off. He's never really been a burner. So that is something to consider. Because of that, I don't see Joe Douglas shelling out a ton of money for him, but I think they'll sniff around. But outside of Allen Robinson, it's like, who's out there? So is that a big mistake? I wouldn't say huge mistake. Maybe we'll look back on it as a mistake, but I still think there's enough out there between free agency and the draft to put the receiver spot in a good position.
Right. I mean, I think, like you said, there's just that option isn't really there anymore with the guys who've been tagged, traded, suspended. So it's, Allen Robinson is easily the highest ceiling player available. We know he can be that, the prototype number one guy, but last year he wasn't anything close to that. So uh, we're gonna have to see, is that gonna go down as an outlier? He's still got more left, or is this him just hitting the wall? He's gonna be 29 this year, so it's around that age where guys start to fall off a little bit. So we'll see. But he's really the only guy that might classify as that. Other than that, I don't see who you're getting who checks that box. So like we said earlier, I think the best path is get the best guy you can. There's some solid players out there. Michael Gallup, although it seems like he's going back to Dallas, but DJ Chark, Russell Gage, Christian Kirk, get a solid guy, make the unit better, and keep it just as high in your draft board as it was before.
I will say the other thing is, I mean, I saw that report about Christian Kirk today where it's like he wants upwards of $15 million.
Yeah.
That is the consequence of the receiver market is pretty thin. And I think a lot of teams will look towards the draft. So maybe you will see more first round receivers than some were expecting. But a guy like Christian Kirk or a guy like DJ Chark or hell, even a Russell Gage is going to get paid. So keep that in mind when the Jets maybe let some of those guys go by. It's like when you see some of those contracts come out, that might change your mind. But like you said, Michael, every team is in a worse cap situation, so maybe the contracts go down with it. Maybe we'll see more one-year contracts like we did in 2020 because not specifically for the Jets, but just year round because the cap is in a bad spot. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe they try to send the money down the road. Who knows? But it is going to be something interesting to watch. Last repetitive question. From at C Pizza, it's CP, whatever. C Pizza IA. I'm sorry, man. You have to have a name I can phonetically say. I mean, I'm sorry. What's the chances we sign Barrios so at that's so Krista _ can start tweeting about someone else? Okay, it was a funny tweet. It's at C Pizza IA.
C Pizza IA.
It wasn't as hard.
Iowa. IA stands for Iowa. C Pizza Iowa.
It's been a long day, Michael. The letters got all blended together. I didn't know what I was looking at. But what are the chances we sign Barrios? What would you put that at? Like 30?
50? Is that a little high, you think?
I think 40%. That's my gut feeling. It's not necessarily the likelihood of it.
I think it comes down to how likely you think it is they sign other wide receivers, because if they don't sign anybody else, I think they're absolutely going to prioritize Barrios first and foremost. But if they do like some of those other guys, I think they'll do that first, and then Barrios kind of, like we said, it's like how much do you want to spend with three other wide receivers ahead of him and potentially a draft pick? So yeah, I think that's what it is. Are you going to sign Gage, Kirk, whoever, or Barrios?
It's like, does the market thinning down make the Jets more likely to sign Barrios because they have nobody else and they're going to try to pivot to him? Or does it make it less likely because everybody else is going to be, maybe Barrios will get a higher contract from somebody else because, the market is kind of thin at receiver. Who knows? All right. Those are the last of a bit of a repeats questions. Let's get, see, now I've messed it all up. I scrolled all the way down. There we go. The guard question I was referring to earlier, Michael, from at Big Dogs 1318. Do you think the Jets will sign a guard to a bigger contract than most people think? And do you think they will go after one of the big ticket free agents this year in Armstead, Williamson, Robinson, Chandler Jones, or will they sign younger guys to cheaper contracts? We've answered the big ticket stuff. I don't think you're going to see, you might see one like the Bengals last year with Trey Hendrickson and then a few starters. I think you're going to see quantity, not necessarily over quality, but you're going to see quantity signings this year. And those guys can be starters and good players too. But as far as the guards, and this is actually where I think the Jets are really going to get a good starting player here. Michael, I mean, I think you and I both agree that the Jets should and probably will send a guard to a contract. I think that contract, probably will. I don't know about bigger than people who are expecting, but it doubled, probably $10 million, $11 million contract. My question to you, though, Michael, relating to what Michael said, Michael Christopher, not you, Michael Nania, is how would you rank these guards? Because it's actually, in my eyes, it's the deepest and best position in free agency right now. Because not only do you have James Daniels, not only do you have a guy like Austin Corbett or Connor Williams or Laken Tomlinson. I mean, there are a lot. You could pivot if all else fails. You could re-sign LDT. There's a lot of great guards out there, and not just guards, interior offensive linemen as a whole, but specifically at right guard. Where would you rank your preference at that spot, since it's very clear that you and I both want to sign one.
Well, this actually brings me back to a guy who I forgot to mention in that previous question about which signings I would not want to see.
All over the place, God damn it.
But Brandon Scherf, I think he is going to get the biggest contract, and he's a talented player. He's really good, but he's just so consistently injured that he's hard to trust. It's not even like he had one big injury where he missed a bunch of games. He's just constantly multiple injury stints per year, 6 missed games this year, 3 the year before that, 5 the year before that, 8 the year before that. It's just impossible to rely on. You're paying for 60% of a season and 60% Scherf and 40% backup. That's what you're paying for.
All right, so sign LDT and Scherf is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I Scherf's a good player, but the injuries are too much, especially he's going to be 31 in December. So I wouldn't be a big fan of that.
If they sign him, you'll be upset?
I think I would, just because of the injuries. It's so hard to rely on.
So just for everybody keeping track at home, if the Jets sign Matthew, what was the second? Why am I
Barrios?
Yeah, it was Barrios. If it's Matthew, Barrios or Scherf, and Barrios, I guess it's money dependent, maybe.
I mean, every player is money dependent.
Right. I guess
sign Matthew for $1 million. Okay. I'll sign up all day.
Matthew, Barrios or Scherf. If we get on this podcast next week, and Michael is talking up how great Joe Douglas is, and they've signed one of those 3 players, you can call Michael a hypocrite. But how would you rank these guys?
Go right ahead. I will absolutely, I'm not going to walk back on it.
You'll take it on the show.
Criticize it. I will try to find the optimism, because that's what I do, but I will acknowledge the criticisms. But ranking the guards, I think I have a first tier that includes 2 guys. I mentioned it earlier, but Laken Tomlinson and James Daniels. I think that's your top tier. Daniels is, I think, 5 years younger than Tomlinson, so different in age, but they both offer, I think, a lot of the things you want. They're solid pass protectors, great zone blockers. Tomlinson obviously has experience with LaFleur in the scheme. I think both those guys are really good guards. Tomlinson, the question is, he's a left guard, so he'd have to move over. Daniels is a right guard, but both guys are, I think, legitimately solid players and good scheme fits. Beyond that, though, I think there are 2 other interesting options: Austin Corbett and Connor Williams. Corbett is, I think he's a tier below because of his pass protection, but he does have the run game scheme fit, decent, good run blocker. He's not a very good pass blocker, though, so I'd be questioning that one. But Connor Williams is an underrated guy to me. Nobody seems to like him, and for good reason. He had 15 penalties last year, which is obviously terrible.
All right, I'm out.
And listen, I'm gonna make my case for Connor Williams. But other than that, he has like legitimately elite numbers. He gave up the 3rd lowest pressure rate among guards last year
because he's tackling guys to the ground every play.
I mean, if that's the argument you want to make, but I'm signing up for that, regardless of how many penalties. He commits 1 penalty a game and dominates the rest of it. I'll take that. And his run blocking is also very good and a zone scheme fit. So I think he's an underrated target in spite of the penalties that get everyone's attention. But yeah, I think Tomlinson and Daniels is where you want to focus at guard. Then Corbett, Williams, there are also options. Andrew Norwell, veteran guy, is still a decent player. He's maybe in that mix. But Tomlinson and Daniels are fantastic options, I think.
I definitely think the Jets are going to sign one of these guards we talked about. Tomlinson, with the Mike McDaniel connection and Miami having the most cap space, and obviously, I mean, Miami versus New York is going to win most of the time because it's like no state income tax, great weather, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I think Tomlinson might end up in Miami, so I don't want to get my hopes up about him, but I agree with you. I love him. I think the Jets just need to get a lot more physical up front. I think that's part of the reason they'd be moving on from LUT is they just need to be meaner. Our next question is going to be talking about one of the meanest offensive linemen in the league. I like Daniels a lot. I think I would be so much more in on Connor Williams, like you're saying. If there's nothing I hate more than a holding penalty bringing back a touchdown or a big.
And also one more thing, it was an outlier for him. Before this year, he was very normal with penalties, and also pretty much every Cowboys player to career high in penalties. I don't know why or what that was about, but he wasn't alone with it. So
maybe it was.
I'm kind of in on Connor Williams.
All right, I could get in on it too. I agree with what you're saying on the analytics. I don't love offensive linemen who are highly penalized, and that is one of the things that we saw Joe Douglas really prioritize his first offseason when he was building the offensive lineman. I think
Right.
every
Yeah.
offensive lineman he brought in had like little to no penalties. Um, so I don't know, but if they believe they can, if they're watching the film on Connor Williams and they think they can iron some of that stuff out, and you get the good without the bad, then absolutely. But I think James Daniels is the top target. He's only 24, good fit in the system, great run blocker. He's a meanie. So I like James Daniels the most. I don't know if he gets out of Chicago though. So if not, then you pivot to Tomlinson. Tomlinson, I just feel like he's going to go to Miami with that McDaniel connection, and so then you're looking at Corbett, Connor Williams. So who knows? But one of those guys is going to be a Jet. I would be upset if not. The other position on the offensive line that I do think the Jets will make an upgrade at is center. Do you agree with me there, Michael? Because this question from @Jack underscore Nadu too. He says, did McGovern do enough to prevent the possibility of a Jensen signing? He has a follow-up question that's not related. We'll come back to that in a second, Jack. But do you think McGovern did enough to prevent Jensen? Because it seems like if you read what the beat reporters are saying, they're saying, oh, the Jets like McGovern, and that's been their company line. And he was certainly better last year than the year before. But I feel like they can really do better there. I feel like if you have a great center in this offense, it would really open up things and help out this quarterback. But what are your thoughts on McGovern? And then we can talk about the centers.
I'm a McGovern fan. I'm okay with him standing there or staying at that position, mostly because I just don't see a surefire upgrade. I mean, Jensen is, but I don't think he's gonna come here just because he's a veteran. Probably. I mean, he could want to cash in if he has won a Super Bowl. If the Jets really want to cash in on him, I guess it's a possibility. But I just think he's an awesome fit in this run scheme. He makes so many great hook blocks where he just fires off the ball, gets around the 3-tech and seals on backside. It's just like
McGovern.
McGovern.
Yeah.
And there's just not a lot of centers who can make that play. Like I watched Jonathan Harrison, Spencer Long just lumber around.
All right. Well, that
bowled over for 2 years. Not that you want to compare to those guys.
That's like, but
I mean,
like comparing my basketball skills to Damian Lillard or something. It's like, all right, that's a big difference.
Even to average guys, forget about that. He does have really good athleticism. He's a good fit. And this year, I've talked about this a lot, but I think his one-on-one pass blocking is good. It's just the mental stuff, blitz pickups, stunts, and things like that. And he was a little bit better this year. It's still an issue though. So that's kind of the limitation with him. But I think he really fits what they're trying to do, and it seems like he's a solid culture guy and they like him. So the only thing I would do is if you can sign Jensen, I like moving McGovern to guard because he can get all that physical stuff and take away the sort of the mental responsibilities that come with center. I mean, you still have to pick up blitzes and stunts, but there obviously is less mental workload at guard than center. So I would like that possibility. But other than if they can somehow get Jensen, who obviously is really good and an enforcer, I think McGovern has earned the right to stay put.
There's another Jensen question from @iPod Ahmad, and he said pros and cons of signing Ryan Jensen. I want the answer to that question, but also another center from Baltimore who's been flying under the radar. You're not as high on. There was an analytical tweet this week that had him as the highest rated center, and that's Bozeman from Baltimore. So pros and cons. We'll start with Jensen, who seems to be the favorite at center for most Jets fans. But then Bozeman got the Baltimore Joe Douglas connection. He's still fairly young. He had a great season last year. His analytics are great. There's some issues, though, that you pointed out to me. So pros and cons of each center. Because the way you're talking about it, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they don't make an upgraded center and they just roll with McGovern.
I mean, I guess the main concern with Jensen is his age. He's going to be 31, but he's still really good. He hasn't missed a game since 2016. So, I mean, Jensen would be a good pickup, I think. As much as I like McGovern, I think if you can get Jensen, if he's open to it and you are willing to make that offer, whatever it takes, I think I'd be on board for it. Especially because you can obviously, I like the idea of moving to guard, but even if you don't do that, you can cut him, save $9 million, and essentially get Jensen for only the net between what he cost versus McGovern. So yeah, I don't I don't see a ton of concerns with him besides the age. And then with Bozeman, it seems like he's a really good player, but I'm not sure. It seems like with every single offensive lineman's like zone fit, zone fit, zone fit, every single guy. But Bozeman, I think, is one guy you can actually say who's not really scheme fit because Baltimore does run a lot of gap stuff, and then you look at Bozeman's athleticism numbers; they're pretty bad. Obviously, he's overcome it to still be a pretty good player, but um, athleticism is important in the scheme, and he has pretty bad numbers in terms of every single combine drill. So he seems like more of a power downhill sort of guy, not really the center that they want. But there definitely have been exceptions to the rule. Not like Laken Tomlinson, for example. He has very bad, not very bad, but below average combine numbers, and he's been great in his own scheme. So it doesn't always have to, be as black and white as that. But and it doesn't seem like Bozeman's the best fit.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there. I think Jensen is probably who I prefer. I mean, I could go either way. I think Jensen is probably the better player, but especially when you factor in the scheme and what he's going to bring also on the field in terms, if you want to talk about building the bully up front, I mean, that's the biggest bully in the league. I was going to make a Richie Incognito joke. We'll pass on that. But no, I mean, it seems like every game that the Jets play against Ryan Jensen, he's picking a fight. Every game that Ryan Jensen is in, it seems like he's picking a fight. And I like that in my offensive lineman. And I think the Jets were soft up front. And it's one thing, I understand that they're running this outside zone scheme and they're going to value the agile guys, the finesse guys. But the Jets got punched in the mouth plenty of times in the trenches. And I just don't think that's not the team that Joe Douglas is trying to build. And so he wants guys who are, he wants a bully. And I think Ryan Jensen's a bully. And I think that's what attracts me about him. And the same goes with Bozeman too. Obviously the athleticism numbers, like you said, aren't there. Maybe he's a questionable scheme fit, but again, he brings some physicality to this Jets interior offensive line. And I think that's just something that they lack a little bit with McGovern and LDT. I think AVT has the nastiness and the athleticism, which makes him so perfect in this offense. But I'd like to pair a meaner center next to him than McGovern, but that's just my preference. Jack _ Nadu too. He also asked, and this is a nice transition. He said, also, what kind of contract would you give DJ Jones? I think that really comes down to what they do with Rankins, because if they keep Rankins, I don't know if they sign DJ Jones. Maybe, but in my opinion, it's like they either keep Rankins at $6 million or 5.5 or whatever it is, and you draft a defensive lineman and another interior defensive lineman and a great defensive line class. You also have Jonathan Marshall, or you cut Sheldon Rankins, you sign DJ Jones to replace Foley Fatukasi as your run stuffing defensive tackle, and then you draft a pass rushing defensive tackle. And there are plenty of those guys that we saw even just at the Senior Bowl. So Michael, what do you think about DJ Jones, about bringing him in? What do you think he's going to cost? And then how do you think the Jets move their interior defensive linemen around, especially considering how deep Saleh wants this rotation?
Yeah, DJ Jones is my guy. Obviously, I've kind of tweeted about him a lot. I think he's an amazing fit. Probably of any free agent at any position, at least the ones that I've analyzed. I don't think anyone fits as seamlessly as he does. He pretty much does, or was used exactly the same way that they wanted to use Fatukasi this year. A little bit of nose tackle, but mostly operating at over the guard, 3 tech, 2 2 tech. And, because that's where you need the run defense to come from in the scheme. There's really no, every down or frequent nose tackle in this 4-3 defense. The run stuffing has to come from more over towards the B gap. And that's what DJ Jones did really well. You'll see him listed as a nose tackle because he stops the run, but he almost never plays that, only about 10% of the time. That's what they tried to do with Fatukasi. They really sliced his nose tackle usage, and he was still pretty good, but not quite as dominant. Whereas DJ Jones in that same role, a little bit smaller guy, better mover, plays the exact same role, experienced in the scheme, and has shown that he can dominate in that role as a run stuffer. So I think that's the type of guy they need, someone who could make plays against the run, but in this way, in a 4-3 scheme, attacking, shooting gaps, not necessarily in a space eating sort of way like Fatukasi does. So I think Jones is an amazing fit, and I'd love to get him. But look, the guy's a good player. He's going to get paid. If Fadakasi is going to get overpaid, too high for you to retain, he gets 8, 9, 10 million, whatever. DJ Jones is probably going to get that too. So, like you said, if they don't cut Rankins, that's going to be a bit much to commit to your D line. What Jones is probably going to get, but if they do cut Rankins, I think they definitely have the flexibility to make that move. So I like him quite a bit, and if they cut Rankins, I would be all over that.
I know Rankins has some name recognition, and he had a few flashy sacks, but like you pointed out, he was a lot worse than people realize he was. I think they cut him, and I think they try to go after DJ Jones. I think they only cut Rankins if they get a guy like DJ Jones. Otherwise, they're going to keep Rankins. I mean, when you look at the usage for defensive linemen, their fourth string defensive tackle is going to play consistent snaps. So it's like, even if Sheldon Rankins didn't necessarily live up to the $5.5 million you gave him last year, on third downs, on passing situations, he can rush the passer for you. But I would much rather, especially with Fadakasi walking on an already horrible run defense, I'd cut Rankins, bring in DJ Jones, and then go ahead and draft that pass rushing defensive tackle. Why not? From @JetsFan and CLT, off-ball linebackers seem to fall in the draft. Another draft question. Come on. Off-ball linebackers seem to fall in the draft most years. Can you envision the concerns over Dean's height or Lloyd's age to cause one of them to drop in 35? Can I envision it? Absolutely. Do I think it will happen? Probably not, but it happens every year. Like I brought up Traylon Burks a few minutes ago. It's another guy I could see falling at 35. And if you said that to me 2 months ago, I would have thought you were crazy. But it's like, he didn't blow up the combine like people thought he would, and people overthink it. And, and there's a deep receiver class and whatever. And all of a sudden, 35 rolls around, and there's a guy you thought would never be there will be there. I guarantee you that will happen. I guarantee you the Jets will be on the clock at 35. Or I'll put it this way. I'll guarantee you at the start of day 2, there will be people, at least one in particular, that fans will say, there's no way he should still be available. We have to trade up and get him or whatever. It's like, it happens every year. Michael and I were talking about this a few months ago on the podcast. It's like, go look at the first 10 picks of the second round, or the first 5 picks of the second round. They're almost always better than the last 5 picks of the first round. Second round, you get a lot of talent in, and it's like, guys like that fall. Like, if a guy like Nakobe Dean is there at 35, it's going to be hard to pass on him. I mean, it depends what they do at linebacker. I guess to turn it into a bit of a linebacker question, do you think they go and spend a linebacker in free agency? DJ Bieniemy, when we had him on a few weeks ago, he was saying that they don't see linebacker as big of a need because they like Quincy Williams. They have Sherwood and Nasruddin still. They could, draft a linebacker and develop him. But it's like, you got 2 guys out there in Foye Oluokun and Devondre Campbell, who both have experience with Ulbrich. Spacing exactly. Was it Mike Garofalo? Somebody had a video. I apologize, but somebody had a video this week that was talking about how, Ulbrich was in this, was there when they drafted Oluokun and was talking about how much he loved him and how versatile he is. And, he very much had his hand in that pot of picking Oluokun. So there's connections there, and there's a few other good guys and an obvious need. Do you think that the Jets go after linebacker in free agency, or do they wait to the draft and then maybe they get lucky with a guy like Nakobe Dean falling?
I don't. And this is similar to Rankins, where if I were in charge, I would definitely be prioritizing linebacker a little bit more, because I think they can upgrade there. And it's a super important position, their defense. But personally, I would upgrade it. I just haven't seen any signal that suggests that they want to. Like you said, DJ told us that they seem to be high on the guys that they have. They just spent 2 developmental picks on it last year. And not that, 2 day 3 picks prevent you from doing anything, but it doesn't.
That were safeties nonetheless.
Exactly, but it does seem like that they're committed, and we talked about this earlier, how they're committed to like drafting for the coaching staff, letting them work with this talent. So it just doesn't seem like that they're going to prioritize it. But you mentioned Oluokun, Devondre Campbell, another guy, the Ulbrich connection on the market. So there are connections. So they're not getting Bobby Wagner. I was going to say him, but yeah, there are other 2 Falcons connections there, but I don't think so. And then same thing with Rankins. Like, I would cut him because I don't think he was very good last year, but just because of the locker room impact. And I think Rankins is the type of player they want in that role. He just didn't play well last year. So those are 2 things that I would do, but I don't see much indication that they will.
How much did they pay Davis last year? Was it 7.5?
I believe it was. I see that number, but wasn't it 5.5? Like,
I
wasn't that
remember when
the
they
cap hit?
I remember the announcement was 7.5 because I remember people being like, "Oh, they overpaid for him," but maybe it was only 5.5 guaranteed, or maybe 7.5 was with incentives or something. I don't know. But the reason I bring that up is because I think part of the reason you might have the feeling that they don't want to spend at linebacker is because they're already committing so much money to CJ Mosley, whose cap hit is even higher, I think, this year. I think it's like 19 million this year. I think this is the highest year, if I'm not mistaken. It could have been last year. Regardless, it's 18, 19, it's around there. It's a high number. And so it's a quote unquote non-premium position. Do they want to go and fork over close to $10 million for a guy like Devondre Campbell? Maybe not. But I will say this. I actually do think they make a move here because it's like they gave Gerard Davis, we'll say 7.5 for now, but a little less than that potentially. They gave Jared Davis money last year. I think they'll do something similar this year. I don't know if they go for Devondre Campbell. I really like him. And I think when you saw how much linebacker affected this defense, particularly in the run game, how awful it was, and in the pass, I mean, all phases, the linebacker play was awful this year outside of Mosley and a few Quincy Williams flashes. I do think it's a big need. I think Campbell fits with them. I don't think they go Campbell. Aluakon kind of reminds me of Quincy Williams in a sense. I think that's the type of player they're hoping Quincy can be, so it's a bit redundant. The guy I think they go after, Landon Collins. What do you think about that? Who had a great year last year. He's only getting cut because of the contract reasons. They asked him to take 2 different pay cuts. He accepted the first one, didn't want to accept the second one. They were in the Keanu Neal sweepstakes last year. Obviously, they drafted 2 guys who were safeties, converted linebackers. Landon Collins played a lot of linebacker last year. He had a great year. I think he's the type of guy that they'll sign. I wouldn't be shocked if they go after Devondre Campbell or a Aluakon. In fact, I'd be pretty hyped if they went and signed a Devondre Campbell because I do think him and Mosley next to each other would raise the level of this defense tremendously. But if they don't want to go that path, I still think they go and sniff around a guy like Landon Collins or the other guys in the market. I do think they make a move here next week. But what do you think about Landon Collins, who got released a few days ago?
Yeah, I like that. I think it's sort of outside the box thinking that they've sort of shown at linebacker, those picks they made last year. So I could absolutely see that being considered. It does seem like Collins has been a miscast linebacker for quite some time now. He usually, I mean, he basically does already play it, not to a full-time extent, but he lines up in the box more than any other safety. And he does do well. Like, I mean, he gets criticized because he's bad in coverage, and he is very bad in coverage for safety, but his run stopping and his tackling and all that, linebacker skills
and his coverage
are definitely there. Yeah, like it's a lot different. So he could transfer well. So I can see them considering that. And you mentioned Keanu Neal, he's the free agent as well.
Yeah.
So that's in play. So I could absolutely see one of those safety type linebacker moves.
Yeah, I think it doesn't even to me have to be one of those safety types because they have Hamza and James. I just think they're going to make a move at linebacker and free agency is what I think it is. And I like Landon Collins, and we'll see. All right, from Yosimar_Boyce, he says, what are each of your guys' top 3 free agent targets as free agency opens up? I apologize if I butchered your name. It's been a long day. Top 3 free agent targets, free agency opens up. I'm trying to think of I know there's plenty of names coming through my head. I'm just trying to think of the top 3 in particular.
Okay,
Michael, do you have a top
I think
3?
I have a few. I can.
Well, I have a few. I'm trying to narrow it down to 3.
Yeah, I think I can list the top 3. Okay, so DJ Jones, he's my guy. Yeah. I would love to get DJ Jones. Quandre Diggs, I really like. And again, I'm not listening to best play. Not again. I'm saying this for the first time. I'm not listening to best players right now. Just like value, scheme fit, like my guys. So DJ Jones, Quandre Diggs, I think he's a very consistent interception producer, good coverage guy that gives up very little. Sort of like not a poor man's Marcus Williams, but a slightly less than rich man's Marcus Williams. He's a little bit older, a little bit less productive, but another really good option. So DJ Jones, Quandre Diggs. I'm going to look to tight end. I'm going to go with Max Williams. I think he's one of the best blocking tight ends in the league, and he also is not a high volume receiver, but he has really good numbers at breaking tackles, low drops, things like that. So he's got some upside.
Are you concerned
so
with
I like
the
those
injuries?
3 guys.
Are you concerned with the injuries with Max Williams? Because that's kind of my big thing with
Yeah,
him.
yeah, it's definitely a concern. But I mean,
He's been injured like every season, including this last year where he was on pace to have a great year, and then he tears ACL.
yeah. So
So
I mean, it's definitely a concern. But obviously, you're hoping with that, that he comes cheaper. That's being considered. So I mean,
all right,
I'll be completely honest with you. I wasn't thinking of the injuries when I said his name, but player wise, I do like him.
that's fair enough, Michael. I respect the honesty. I'll try to go.
It's 10:45. My brain is kind of turning off already.
I'll try to give three different names. Um, I'm trying to think. Not in order, not in any particular order. I'll go Hayden Hurst. He's the tight end target that I want. Out of all of them, he's the one that intrigues me the most because I think he really hasn't gotten much of his shot. I mean, he had 2020. He was the starter for the Falcons, and he had 6 touchdowns. He had a solid season, and they draft Kyle Pitts. And sorry, I should have gone back even further. When he was in Baltimore, he was a fine starting tight end. They drafted Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews kind of usurped him. They trade him to Atlanta for like a second round pick. He plays relatively well, but then Kyle Pitts is there. They take Pitts. Hurst still had a few touchdowns this year. I think Hurst is exactly the type of tight end that they need. He's a good blocker, reliable receiver. He's only 28. I think you pair him with a guy like McBride. That's a great tight end duo. So I like Hayden Hurst a lot. I'll say I'll say James Daniels. I was deciding which guard I want to say. I think because of the age, it's hard not to say James Daniels. But honestly, any one of those guards. I'll start with Daniels. Moving down, I'd probably look at then Tomlinson and then so on. But Daniels and then Tomlinson are, I think, tier A, like you said. And then I would say DJ Jones. I completely agree with that. That's a great free agent for the Jets. I'd be really excited about him. I'll go Ryan Jensen. I was stuck between Jensen and maybe a Devondre Campbell because it's intriguing thinking about Campbell playing next to Mosley. But look, if they walked out of free agency, all offense, just Jensen, Daniels, and Hurst. I mean, how are you not excited about that? But yeah, defensively, I like DJ Jones. I'd like to get a linebacker. Devondre Campbell was an All-Pro last year. It's hard not to like him. As far as the safeties go, I'm with you on Quandre Diggs. I like him. As much as I like Marcus Williams, and I was very high on signing him at the beginning of the offseason, the more people have talked about him, the more that contract keeps going up. I don't see Douglas shelling out that $15 million or whatever it's going to. Maybe it's not 15, maybe it's 14, whatever. I don't know if I see him shelling out that big money for a safety. Michael and I were talking about this. It's, bad safety play will lose you games, but great safety play doesn't really win you games. So it's like you want good players there, but you don't necessarily need amazing players there, especially with how many holes the Jets have. So I'll go those as my top 3 targets. Michael, the last question. Again, not really a free agency question. This is probably more of a scouting combine question, but we were a bit inconsistent there. The month of February. So this question's coming in from Andrew Golden, contributor to JetX and friend of the podcast. He says, "Who runs a faster 40, you or Michael Nania?" And then he says, "Place your bets now, everybody." He said he's got the over under on me at 498, and then even more astonishingly, he has the over under on you at 486, which would pitch. Jerry Rice ran a 471. So Nanny is right behind him. Michael and I, we did do this when you came up to
Yes.
It was we didn't really measure it out completely. It was like kind of eyeballed it, did it with our feet or whatever. It's like, all right, that's about 40 feet. We timed it. I don't remember the exact times. I know I won. But I think it's time, Mike. We've been talking about this for like 2 years now. We need a full JetX combine this summer. We have to do it. The next time I see you in person, Michael, we really got to run the gauntlet. Officially, the 40-yard.
Yeah.
You think you did good in the 3-cone is what I've heard. You were talking a pretty big game on the 3-cone. I think my lateral quickness is my best attribute from all the kickboxing. So it's like, I kind of feel like I beat you there, but maybe you would have me there from your flag football and basketball days.
Yeah, so I mean, we did do this up in Cuse when I visited last year, and you did get the win quite comfortably too, I believe. So of course I'll give you credit. I think this has been asked before. I think in these questions, something like this with the 40 time, and I feel like my athleticism always gets overrated, and yours always gets underrated. Look, I think I'm a average athlete, but I got to put more work into it. But I don't think the people appreciate some of your athletic background and abilities with kickboxing and everything. You are a superhuman athlete in addition to being a superhuman podcast host. Yeah, so I think more people need to appreciate that.
It's me DK Metcalf, Aaron Donald. I mean, that's the type of tier of athlete that I'm in.
Yeah,
Michael's
yeah.
more of like, I don't know, Robbie Anderson.
Who's that guy that ran the 606?
Oh, yeah. Well, we were watching the
That's the
slowest.
class
It
that
was like
I'm.
Isaiah Williams or something. I forget his exact name. We were watching the slowest 40-yard dash times, which is a great watch if anybody wants to check it out.
And we were talking about this. It's like I don't think enough people realize. Like even if you watch that one, like whatever, I forget what his name is, but he did a 606, and it looks comical compared to the rest of the guys who run at the 40. But even that, like I think there are a lot of average people who couldn't do it. Like you don't realize how athletic these guys are. Rich Eisen is he seems like the most average build and fit that there could be.
Yeah,
and
he works out, but he's not like
6.0. So it's not easy to do. So I would hope to get. I think my goal would be like 5'2", 5'3". I would hope to get under that.
I think right. I don't know. I think you're right. I think low fives is a nice place to aim. I think I could maybe break 5, but I don't want to. I mean, like you said, it is crazy how the standard gets skewed a little bit because these guys are superhumans, and then you see like a random, you're a regular guy like Rich Eisen run it, and you think he's comically slow, but it's like no, Rich Eisen's actually in fairly good shape. I mean, he does run a little bit, but that one 40-yard dash time is pretty amazing. All right, Michael, I think we've wrapped it up here. I mean, we will have more podcasts this week as the free agents news trickles in. As far as the exact schedule, honestly, if they make a big move, we'll do on Monday night. If they don't really do anything, then we'll probably Tuesday night. So at the very latest, Tuesday night will be the next podcast. Earliest will be Monday night. This is going to come out Sunday morning. Maybe we'll have one Monday and Tuesday, depending what they do. We'll figure out the schedule this week as it goes. Just trying to bring podcasts when the news comes. But you can expect to hear from us next week. We thank you for everybody submitting mailbag questions. Apologies to those who I butchered their names. I can't be held accountable for that, especially the ones that aren't easy to say. Like the ones that just you can't say phonetically. It's like, am I just supposed to read out the letters? I don't know. But I apologize for that. You can follow us at CYJ Pod. See how I guess that is, I'm a bit of a hypocrite because you couldn't say CYJ Pod. You have to say CYJ Pod. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry to, who was that? Who really screwed me up here? It was somebody in here. I forget. Oh, it was
Pizza?
Yeah, it was like
one?
pizza. Something. I might have deleted it when we were moving down. Sorry. Pizza guy. Forgot. Sorry about that. But at CYJ Pod on Twitter, follow us there. Michael_Nania, Ben W. Blessington. Go to jetsxfactor.com for the best place to go for Jets content. Feel like I'm forgetting something. Whatever. Michael, any last thoughts?
No, I don't think so. We got to do a JetX combine at some point with very rigid timing and measurements and everything because we need the official numbers.
The hand size is really what it's going to come down to.
It's funny you mentioned that because with all the numbers, I wanted to measure mine. I do have a ruler on my desk here. So apparently, I forget what my number was. So actually, I'm going to pull it out right now. And so I had to look it up. Apparently, they measure from like you extend your hand, it's from like the end of your thumb to the end of your pinky finger. Yes. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this right now.
Okay.
Hopefully, I have bigger hands than Kenny Pickett. Actually, I know I do.
Did you see
what the number was?
It was 8.5.
Okay, so I'm at about 9.5. 9.
Wow, 9.5. Well, that would actually put you fairly, because I think Burrow had 9 and people were kind of skeptical about that, but then 9.5 is like, that's a good quarterback hand size.
Pretty solid.
I don't have a ruler nearby. I'm not a freak like you, Michael, so I'd have to measure that another time. But yeah, did you see that one photo of Kenny Pickett where he had I was looking at I think it was Rich Eisen's podcast. Wow, Rich Eisen getting a bunch of shout outs. Actually, I think Ryan Leaf was hosting the Rich Eisen podcast and they were talking about Kenny Pickett's hands and they put up a photo of him holding the football and Ryan Leaf thought it was photoshopped and I did too. I mean, it is kind of questionable. I mean, 8.5 is, I don't know. I mean, but he did play in Pittsburgh, so it's not like, unless he's, I don't know. I guess the hand size stuff is overrated. Joe Burrow's done just fine. But yeah,
I think that is concerning. Like even Joe Burrow's like what he was like 9.25 or something like that.
Yeah, it was something like that. 8.5. Yeah, I'll retweet the photo that I saw. It was like comical. Like it looked like he had like little tiny baby hands. But who knows? Maybe he'll prove everybody wrong. I will say last thought on this. Actually, fuck it, I already teased it. I think Malik Willis to goes top 3. I don't know why. I just have that feeling. I have a feeling he goes top 3. Do you agree with that, Michael? And because of that, I think a good edge rusher will fall to the Jets. That's what I feel. I think Pickett will fall, but I think Willis is going to be the first quarterback taken, and I think he's going to go a lot higher than everybody thinks he will. Especially after all the quarterback dust settles from the Rodgers, Wilson, whatever. Somebody's going to move up, or the Lions take them themselves at 2, and they're going to take Malik Willis. Thoughts?
I think it's possible. I really feel like that the 2 edge rushers are going to end up going. I think Hutchinson is going to go number 1. I really do.
But didn't they just franchise tagged Cam Robinson? The Jaguars did, so it kind of makes it a little less likely that they'd go tackle.
Right. So I think tackle is not quite as much of a lock for Jacksonville. Still possible, but but I do think Willis is probably going to sneak up there just because quarterback always finds its way. Even when they say it's a bad class, it always finds its way into the mix because it's just that important.
All right, Michael. I think it's time for us to get out of here. We will be back.
Well, either that or we're just trying to make up a way for Kayvon to get to the Jets.
Yes. Kayvon or Hutchinson, one of those guys. I think the Jets are walking out of this draft with a good edge rusher. So, but that's draft talk, Michael. We got a whole nother month for that. This is free agency talk. Don't try to fire the GM 20 minutes into free agency. Give it some time.
Give it 40 minutes, 45.
I would say give them the first day. I think the first day because it's not technically they're not even signing contracts yet. So you give him Monday, and then you get a little bit on Tuesday. If he's not doing anything by Tuesday, I'll get especially when guys are getting signed, I'll get some of the upset about him not signing guys. But I don't know. I'll be patient. I think I like I trust what the Jets are doing, and I think they're going to have a solid plan here. And that plan is going to be sign a few good players. You don't have to go splurge on one, honestly overrated great player. But we'll see about that. Next time we talk, Michael, we'll know a lot more. So thank you to everybody for listening. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy the start of the new league year. We'll be back later this week.